I think that's the objective. Of course, the Iranians are threatening that they will retaliate against the US and the UK and France, and maybe they will launch a war against the entire world. I mean, they don't have the capability. To say that they can't do anything, of course, would also be wrong. If global superpowers are going to be deterred by this kind of rhetoric, well, I don't think that would be a wise course.
First up, Israel has warned that Tehran will burn as the military prepares a wave of strikes in retaliation for last night's missile attacks from Iran. Last night, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a public address aimed at Iranians, calling them to stand up against the Ayatollah al-Khamenei. So is regime change in Iran likely? Richard Dalton, a British former ambassador to Iran, shared his thoughts on Times Radio Breakfast this morning.
Regime change is unlikely. The reaction of a majority of Iranians to external attack will be to rally around the government, however much they dislike that government. Some are calling for this as a window of opportunity to start a movement of opposition, but there's no trace of that on the ground in Iran so far.
For its part, Iran has warned the US, UK and France that it will strike ships' military bases if they offer any support to Israel to stop retaliatory strikes from Tehran. A former ambassador Dalton told Times Radio Breakfast he believes Israel's strike on Iran on Friday was illegal.
Successive United States national intelligence estimates, the latest in March this year, which nobody in Israel contested, states clearly, as all previous estimates for 15 years have stated, that Iran has developed capabilities which could be used in a nuclear weapons program, but has not decided to develop nuclear weapons and has no nuclear weapons. So in every respect, Israel's attack, claiming a right of preemptive attack against an intolerable threat, was wrong and illegal.
Well, joining us now is Professor Chuck Freilich. He's the former Israel National Security Advisor. Chuck, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
What did you make of what you heard there from the former ambassador to Iran, that these attacks by Israel were illegal?
Well, I certainly disagree with that. Iran has been calling for Israel's destruction ever since the Islamic Republic was established in 1979. And it's not just rhetoric. The supreme leader announced a 9-point plan for Israel's destruction in 2014, and the endless calls aside from that. The nuclear program is going ahead. They have built up a vast ballistic missile program, which in the end could prove to be a greater threat. And they've, of course, poured billions into supporting Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and others. We know that Hamas's game plan when they began the war on October 7th, which was coordinated with the Iranians and Hezbollah, was actually not just a massacre that took place, but it was designed to bring about Israel's annihilation. And we know that they have further, they, in this case Iran, have further developed the plan since then. So one can talk about the niceties of international law, or I believe one can take a more realistic approach to what the Iranian threat really constitutes.
Talks had began between Iran and the US, and President Trump was making positive notes about those talks. Are they now all but completely out of the question with this latest attack?
Well, you're absolutely right. He was making positive statements, but in the last few days had turned around, was making negative statements, saying that he was quite pessimistic about the prospects, or much, much less optimistic than he had been. And the president then came out and has fully supported the Israeli operation. As a matter of fact, he has said, this isn't an Israeli estimate, he has said that he believes that it is actually more likely to bring the Iranians back to the table. The question is, I think too many people, especially those who come from the diplomatic world, become enamored of their diplomatic effort. Well, diplomacy to try and curtail and end the Iranian program has been going on for just 30 years now. And it has produced pauses, delays, but that's all it's done. So maybe it's time to also think in different terms.
What did you make of the plea that we heard from the Israeli Prime Minister in urging the Iranian people to rise up against their own regime? This idea that these attacks could help bring about a regime change in Iran. How likely is that?
Well, I don't know that it is very likely. I don't think it hurts. It's certainly something that would be very nice if it happened. This is a regime which has oppressed, first and foremost, has oppressed its own people in the most heinous ways. And the sooner it no longer exists, I think the better both Iran and the world will be. Whether this war will produce it or not, I don't know.
We spoke earlier to a former State Department official, Josh Paul, who was telling us that this strike has made the Trump administration look like they've been played. They've been looking foolish because there they are trying to negotiate over the negotiating table with Iran, whilst at the same time Israel, which is very much backed up by the US, carries out these attacks. Do you think that this attack has actually harmed those negotiations? And do you also think that it brings the US into danger? Much has been said at the moment about retaliatory attacks, whether on purpose or by accident, hitting US military bases, in which case the US has no choice but to get involved militarily with Iran.
Well, first of all, I think you're quoting a biased source, and I wouldn't make the case based on what he has said. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that Israel would have conducted this operation under any circumstances without American approval. I think it was at least tacit approval, acquiescence. I think it was beyond that. I think the president was supportive when he realized that the talks were stalemated, that he was not going to be able to achieve the breakthrough that he hoped for. And as I said before, he himself has been very, very supportive and said that he thinks it may bring the Iranians back to the table. It's not going to happen tomorrow, obviously. They've suffered a severe loss of faith. It'll take some time. This entire operation will take some time. It's not going to be a matter of days. But I think there is at least a reasonable chance that the Iranians will come back for lack of choice. Okay, it's not because they're going to want to, but partly because the thing that was the primary stumbling block until now, the American insistence that they give up on enrichment and their insistence that they retain the right, well, they're not going to have that much of an enrichment capability left when this is over, hopefully.
So you think that is the ultimately goal, wipe out the nuclear capabilities, and do you think it stops there? What do you think Netanyahu's ultimate goal is here?
Well, I think in the end, as in other cases, or usually wars are fought for political purposes, and the objective here is to bring the Iranians back to the table to get a better deal. Because in the end, we know that the period of time that Israel can gain here, the amount of time that the Iranian program can be postponed is limited. And the only way to reach a long-term solution, or at least a very long-term postponement of the Iranian program, is through a diplomatic deal. So I think that's the objective. Of course, the Iranians are threatening that they will retaliate against the US and the UK and France, and maybe they will launch a war against the entire world. I mean, they don't have the capability. To say that they can't do anything, of course, would also be wrong. If global superpowers are going to be deterred by this kind of rhetoric, well, I don't think that would be a wise course.
Chuck Freilich, thank you so much for giving us your time. I really appreciate it. Former Israel National Security Advisor there.